Sebastian. You are very good in your speech, and I hope that gets you where you want.
It's a great opportunity for us to receive Sebastian here in Milton Campus Law School, and it's a great opportunity for Milton Campus students to get to know other culture and exchange some experience, and I hope we will have further partnerships and this story will goes on.
Um grande prazer recebemos aqui esse rapaz que aparentemente tem um grande currículo, uma grande tipo de conversa de oratória. Espero que seja bacana a palestra.
O Brasil pode aprender com a política, então eu tô com umas expectativas muito altas e ainda mais para ver se eu desenferrujo meu inglês também, para melhorar. Eu acho que vai ser muito boa.
Concerning his book, What Brazil Can Learn from American Politics.
Boa tarde, gente. I'm glad you guys could come here today. I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here and speak to you guys. And I just want to make sure that you guys are getting extra credit in your English classes, because if you can understand everything I say, I think that deserves an A. So maybe you can talk to your professors about that. So I have two versions of my speech. I have a 30-minute version of my speech, and I have a 3-hour version of my speech. And basically, what determines which speech you get, basically if you clap at every opportune moment, if you laugh at all my jokes, then you'll get a 30-minute speech. If you don't, then I can talk for a very, very long time. I give this speech on my book. I would go over and prioritize talking about the 3 points in the book I wrote about. But before I came to Brazil last week, I said, what could best serve the Brazilian people? What could I talk to them about that would best serve them in their moment right now? And it became clear to me, because you're in such a critical election year, that I prioritize talking about two things which are actually not in the book, but also extremely important: mutual toleration. So I only have 3 minutes left before I want to take questions from you guys, so I'm just going to quickly go over the 3 points of my book. I won't go over in detail, because again, I want to hear questions from you guys, and also the details are also in the book, and I go through them extensively. So the first point of the book, I have 3 points. The first point is how politicians and people have to choose country over party. Every time. When politicians choose party over country, it's usually short-term, I want to win the next election based. And that type of thinking never ends well in the long term. And in many ways, it's also tied to when they decide to choose party over country many times consistently, that's also tied to when they stop using forbearance and mutual toleration. And you're seeing the effects of that in our democracy right now. Politicians have chosen party over country instead of country over party, and the effects are just a U.S. that's in stagnation, that isn't improving, and is dysfunctional. The second one is leaders have to make the right choice over the popular choice consistently. And in democracies, this is particularly hard, of course, because if you're not popular enough, you don't get reelected and you get kicked out of office. But leaders who are strong and who say, I understand that people don't want this, but it's what's good for the nation in the long term, always benefit the country in the long term. And those who don't, actually in the future can throw their nation into a much bigger conundrum or a bigger problem. A quick example of this was George H.W. Bush, not the son, the young one, the one before him. He had a decision either to raise taxes and not explode the national debt, or to not raise taxes and increase his chances of winning re-election. And he also made a campaign promise that he was going to raise taxes. But for the best thing for the country, what was in the long-term interest of the nation, was to raise taxes. He decided to raise taxes. He didn't explode the debt, but it did cost him re-election. But because he made that decision, Clinton's economy benefited tremendously from that decision. And the U.S. debt didn't explode him and stayed under control. Now we go to his son, who unfortunately, I guess the right choice over the popular choice doesn't pass from father to son. George W. Bush was faced with a very similar decision of whether to lower taxes or to keep them similar or raise them. And he was faced with that decision while the U.S. was engaged in 2 wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, which were costing us hundreds of billions of dollars. And the right decision was not to lower taxes. Oh, yeah, that's my clock. But the right decision was not to lower taxes, but to at least keep them the same or raise them. Otherwise, he would have exploded the deficit. He lowered taxes, which was the popular decision. He exploded the deficit. Then when Obama came in and the Great Recession came in, Obama had to do a massive stimulus and increase the debt naturally of the country tremendously to pull us out of our Great Recession. And thus we have a $20 trillion debt today. So again, right choice over the popular choice every time, as hard as it is. And the third and last one is you have to be a student of history. There's no problem today that hasn't in some way resembled a problem in the past. And when we look to the past, we can see what countries did and people did when they encountered similar problems, what worked and what didn't. People talk about how complex the Middle East is ethically today. If you look at Europe after the Napoleonic Wars, it was even more ethnically complex. George W. Bush developed a winning strategy in Iraq after 3 years because he looked at the French-Algerian War, which was very similar to the conflict we were in Iraq. So if you look at history, like in your corruption crisis, like right now, you look at when countries went through massive corruption scandals and you look at what they did, you could learn a lot and you could save a lot of pain, a lot of time, and a lot of tears and a lot of blood from basically, save those tears and blood and do the right thing the first time. And I also just, the last thing I want to say is that you guys have to understand that Brazil is a very young democracy. You're only 30 years old. And the U.S. didn't get to the point where it is with all sunshine and rainbows and after 30 years. We're a 250-year-old republic, basically. And we have strong democratic institutions and a strong government within context, of course. Because we went through 250 years of blood, sweat, and tears. We almost destroyed ourselves in the Civil War, racism, corrupt administrations, presidential administrations. We went through a lot of errors, but we fixed them. We didn't let them happen again, and we moved forward. So, as you guys grow into an older democracy, like when you encounter problems like the corruption issues you have now, or like the fact that your constitution is like a book and it doesn't give a lot of flexibility, just fix the problem and move on. Okay, just keep fixing the problem and move on. Your young democracy is going to take time. You're going to go through blood, sweat, and tears. But if you keep making the right choices, if you pay attention, if you care, if you hold your politicians accountable, if you do your homework, then Brazil is going to be very, very well off. But if you don't do that, if you do get complacent and you stop caring, then you're going to recede and you're going to go backwards. I'm very glad to take questions now. Okay, thank you.
So what do you think about the campaign finance regulation?
In the U.S.?
Yeah, in the U.S.
Oh, I absolutely hate it. And I promise you, America hates it as well. And you're seeing that hatred start to turn into votes because Trump both said that, oh, I'm a billionaire, I'm not going to take money from special interests, I'm not going to be beholden to them, and people voted for him just because of that. Bernie Sanders also said the same thing, and he got support just for that. So you're starting to see the retaliation from the American people saying that it's really, that this whole money system, that corporations are able to pass bills that are a detriment to the country as a whole and to the people as a whole, they're getting fed up with it. And I'm confident that eventually we're going to get rid of the system because we've gone through things like this before. In the early 1900s, in the age of monopolies, in the age of the Rockefellers and the J.P. Morgans and Carnegies, where they had massive political interests, the people were fed up. And then eventually you had a Teddy Roosevelt, who was a president strong enough to stand up to these guys and say, no, this is not right. You can't have this amount of money in politics and this has got to stop. So eventually the people do push back and you do get reform. I just think the U.S. isn't at that point where people are fed up enough yet, or willing to vote, or willing to cause the type of instability and uncomfort to politicians to actually change the system. However, I do say the way the system is now is definitely contributing to our dysfunction. They did research. Corporations who want a bill, they have a 60% chance of getting it passed. And if they don't want a bill passed, or if they want to reject it, they have a 100% chance. If there's a significant majority of people in the U.S. who want the bill passed, there's only a 40% chance that the bill passes. And if they don't want it passed, but the corporations want it passed, there's like an only 30 or 20% chance it gets passed. So there's a lot of dirty money. Politicians are not saying where they're getting their money from, and it's super undemocratic. It's legal bribery. That's essentially what it is, and it's got to stop. And I'll tell you, like, if I were president, like, that'd be the first thing, because it's got to stop. And another example of this is defense companies in the U.S. Okay, God bless the work they do. They do tremendous work. They make wonderful weapons for our military to use, and they keep us number one. That being said, they purposefully put factories around the country in different districts to make it to disincentivize congressmen from lowering the defense budget or shutting down factories. Because if they shut down the factory, then they're losing jobs in their district and people will complain. And also, military bases. The Pentagon has been, for years now, saying they want to shut down like 100-something military bases in the United States. But Congress doesn't want to shut it down, because if they do, they lose jobs, and plus the money in the politics is preventing that from happening. So that's just one example as well. So did I answer the question?
From you, like living in a country that you can have change a little bit of the topic, that you can have guns, and do you think?
I knew you were going to say that, by the way. I was anticipating it.
If you put this kind of laws in Brazil, do you think that you have help like the violence? Or...
First, I should acknowledge that America is a very, very special country with our gun culture and the way it's developed. Personally, I think, like, do you guys know about the shooting at the American high school that happened recently? Yeah, and that has been going on for decades. And I think that it's really a disgrace that our Congress has not acted to it, because there's a debate that's going on in America. Like, people say it's the mental illness, it's not the guns. Then they say it's gun control, and then they say you have to arm schools and get rid of gun-free zones. And the sad thing is that in the last 10 years, Congress hasn't even been able to address one of these three problems. Not all three, but even one. So on gun control in the United States, I think personally we're a little too free with gun regulation. There's no federal mandated background checks. Like, I'll give you an example. The shooter that just killed 19 kids in Florida. He bought his assault rifle legally, he had disciplinary issues, he had mental illness issue, it was all on record, but because of a loophole, he went to a gun show and he could buy it without a background check. If you had a system in America where there were extensive background checks, and they made sure that you didn't have disciplinary issues, you weren't mentally unfit, that kid would not have been able to buy the gun. So, but that's like a minimum thing that's usually in like every single country, just America hasn't done that because of our culture and because of fear-mongering by the NRA, which is a lobbyist group in the United States. But in terms of Brazil, I mean, there is strong evidence in the United States as well. Areas in the U.S. where good citizens do have guns, crime goes down because of the deterrence. And there is a solid argument to be made, like in Rio de Janeiro, the favelas, like those criminals are getting guns whether Brazil makes it illegal or not. They don't care. So there's a legitimate argument to be made that if you were free of gun regulation and give guns to good citizens who were mentally stable, of course, you made sure they were trained and they went through the proper background checks, that could possibly lower violence, because then criminals, when they go into a house, would have to be worried about whether that little civilian has a gun or not. So, personally, I do think Brazil's gun laws are too left. They're too much, and you guys should just ease up a little bit. But in our case in the U.S., I think we're too free with them, and we should come back into the towards the middle. Did I answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Sebastian, for your speech.
Thank
it
you.
was very interesting to listen to your perspective.
You're pretty much just, I want to make sure I understand the question. So you're pretty much asking me about what I think about the current electoral college system and what the U.S. could do to avoid demagogues and steps we could take?
No, you know, there's a national popular vote.
Yeah.
It's a proposition, right?
Yeah. There's people advocating that we should get rid of the electoral college and just go to popular vote.
Yeah. What do you think about that? Do you think NPV should be implemented?
Okay. There's advantages and disadvantages to every system, right? So the electoral college, originally the founders did it to keep out demagogues, but that responsibility later on went to the parties and was no longer in the electoral college. But what the electoral college does do is it stops politics from being concentrated in a few big cities in the US and it gives a lot more power and say to farmers in rural, more unpopulated areas. And there's political scientists who argue that in a country as big as the United States, with as large a population and as diverse as the United States, it helps to keep stability. It would help an electoral college that gives power and a say to the minority and the rural farmers that are kind of distant from what's going on. That helps keep stability. But then there's also, the other argument that, we should move past this, we should go on to the popular vote. But if that happens, it'll be more concentrated in cities and things like that. I mean, my personal opinion on it is, I understand the argument for the popular vote. How every vote should count the same and majority wins. If we were to switch to a popular vote, I would like to see the system France has. However, I will caution that the Electoral College, while sometimes delivering results that people may disagree with, like when Trump won and he didn't win a majority of the popular vote, or when Bush won and he didn't win a majority of the popular vote, most of the time in our 250-year history, that hasn't happened, and they've won majorities of the popular vote. And I have to say, up until now, the system's worked pretty well. Not every, occasionally we get bad presidents. We've only had two demagogues in history, and the U.S. has been, I say, pretty successful. So, I would caution those who say to change the system, because it's working. The system's worked. Okay, is it perfect? No, but it's working. Okay, and we've been the most successful democracy in history. We're the preeminent world power in the world, and that's all done while there was an electoral college. I would just caution those who say that we should switch that. It's worked for a long time. So, yeah. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, you did. Thank you.
Okay.
I may agree with you. So, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
You mentioned Bolsa Familia. Do you think the states have enough social programs compared to countries like Germany or Sweden in Europe for unemployed people or for sick people?
I'll put it this way. Countries are like you mentioned Sweden, like the Scandinavian countries that are socialist democracies, who give a lot of benefits to their people and who pay for their college and everything. Their socialism works in Portugal, in large part because, number one, they don't have corruption, and they invest significantly in education and infrastructure and in class mobility and in strengthening a middle class. That's why it works. But from what I've learned about the system here, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm the American, okay? I may be wrong, I don't live here, but it seems as if the way you guys have done socialism, it's not so much as to, again, teach someone how to fish, but just to give them the fish. This continent, not just Brazil, but this continent, spends less on infrastructure than the rest of the world, with the exception of Africa. It takes 22 days to move a product from a port in Venezuela to the other side of the continent. It takes 22 days to move that same product from Venezuela to Belgium. That's not good infrastructure. That's not good infrastructure. Infrastructure increases class mobility, increases economic potential. So, if you're going to be a socialist country, you still have to invest in those things that create class mobility.
I was intending my question towards the United States, whether you think there are enough social...
In the U.S.?
In the States. And not turning into a social country like Sweden.
Yeah.
But if there could be more.
If there could be more, I think there could definitely be more in the U.S. that we could do to increase class mobility through social programs. So what do I mean by that? A side effect of globalization, and you saw the response in the past election, is that our manufacturing sector has been decimated, and a lot of people have lost jobs in places like West Virginia and Kentucky and Wisconsin. And those people saw Trump, who said, we're going to give you the manufacturing jobs back, and they voted for him. But the reason, and it happened in Europe too, but the reason in Europe it wasn't as strong is because in Europe they retrained those workers. They weren't ignored. In the U.S., frankly, they've been ignored. And Trump called them the forgotten people because they were the forgotten people. We didn't retrain them. We were like, whatever. So if the U.S. were to invest in a social program where that retrain manufacturing workers to do more service-based jobs and other jobs that are in abundance in the U.S., that would be great. And that's like a social program that I think the U.S. can step up in. Another one is making the price of college in the US cheaper. It's astronomical right now, and it's astronomical in large part because the funding for colleges to keep their prices low did not go up with inflation over time and stayed stagnant. So I think if the US, if we made an investment, and especially our poor class, our lower class, and our lower middle class people, if they could go to college for next to nothing or for free, I mean, that would be a smart, it's an investment. You're educating people who are going to go and make a higher salary and pay taxes that pay back that education price. Okay, so that's a social program I think the U.S. should very well be doing, and it's also a necessity to stay competitive when we have China who's eroding our technological hegemony over the world, and we need to really step up to the plate on that. In terms of healthcare, in case you're wondering, I guess healthcare is not my specialty, so take everything I say with a grain of salt, but I think the Obamacare was very well intentioned. It's not perfect, but it needs to be fixed, but I think if we can make Obamacare work and make the price of going to the doctor and keeping our population healthy lower, that would be great. But also addressing the principal problem of people go to the doctor when they live on healthy lifestyles. So teaching them in schools, investing in education, teaching them how to live healthy lifestyles, and yeah. Did I answer your question sufficiently this time? Okay.
Inequality affects our democracy.
If you look at states and nations that failed, and civilizations that failed, whether even going back to Rome, inequality was usually present. And in times of destability, there's always usually a massive inequality, a gap between the rich, the haves, and the have-nots, the poor. So it's a political necessity for any nation that they have a strong middle class and poor people are able to move up to the middle class. And when that doesn't happen, they're more open to radical ideas like socialism, like communism, like fascism on both sides of the aisle. And they go and they vote for demagogues or vote for communists and like really hardcore socialists. Correct me if I'm wrong, in Brazil, a huge reason why PT was so dominant is because there's so many poor people in Brazil, and they go and Bolsa da Família and they give free food to them, and they essentially buy votes. That you guys get a middle class, a strong middle class. If you like the height of American power, we had a strong middle class, okay? And today, our middle class, you know, by American standards, of course, is kind of low, and wages for the last 20 years or so have been stagnant. And you see the appeal of a Bernie Sanders starting to get stronger. Bernie Sanders is like a socialist in our country, and he made a pretty good campaign run for the Democratic nomination. And that is in large part because of the massive inequality that's going on, and people see the establishment's failure to address the inequality, so they go for outsiders. So, yeah, did I answer it sufficiently?
Yes.
All right, thanks, Joe.
Obrigado, João. Okay, let's hear from Vitor Hugo now.
We don't want to talk about it, we don't want to discuss, and each side choose a demagogue, and I do think that we have to have a candidate who can bring all these two teams, football teams, let's say this parties together. Yes, and what do you think? What do you see as a main candidate, a main person that you say, oh, this person can bring Brazil to the right place, the right path, to have democracy stable?
I don't think I should give an opinion on who I choose, who's the most preferable, because I'll be honest, I haven't done my homework to the fullest extent to be able to give a valid opinion on that, and I would defer to you guys, you know, who are in Brazil and are hearing the media coverage and are listening to these candidates all the time. With the investigation into Russian meddling, we have Robert Mueller as a special counsel, and Robert Mueller, believe me, is like as straight an arrow as you could get. So you could appoint a special counsel to investigate the highest, most corrupt people in Brazil, and if it's someone you trust who's honest and has a history of not being corrupt and being a straight arrow, that could help alleviate some corruption as well. You know, so it isn't just voting. You can do a lot of other things too. But again, you vote in politicians who decide to do those things. You know, democracy, it really is unbelievable. Okay, did I answer your question, Elena? Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else from the public? It's there.
Yeah, I just want to know, like, we don't have people who represent us on the politics, but I think it's because we don't actually have a politician that is not corrupt, like to be elected. So I don't think we have a lot of options, and I think that that's the bigger problem. And like, when someone who is straight tries to get into politics, they
have to become corrupt to have a chance.
Or they die.
Or they
That's the true line.
They die, they disappear, or they just fade away. Okay, the reason I was laughing when you said that they're all like corrupt is because I was talking to my family in the car, and he goes, I think, if I can say it right in Portuguese, he goes, todos os políticos aqui, Sebastian, é bandidos. So basically, like, they're all robbers, they all steal. It's really challenging. This is why I say the mountain you have ahead of you is really high, because the amount of people that are running for office and have a shot at doing that and not corrupt are so small. However, I will say, because of social media, because of the democratization of information, because you can raise money online, that's starting to change. In a way, I mean, in this way it's benefiting you guys, but in the United States it was kind of to our detriment. So what do I mean by that? So in the US, like I said, the parties were gatekeepers. They had control over the money, the establishment, they had control over media access. In 2016, they lost all of that. They didn't have control over media access, they didn't have control over money raising, and a demagogue was able to manipulate that, gain popularity, and gain power. But in this case, it's good for you, because if a straight arrow, if not a demagogue, but a good guy, were to use social media as well as Trump did, or better, were able to raise money online, he could circumvent and bypass the establishment that makes you, that in order for you to have a shot, you need to be corrupt. Okay? Do you understand? Am I answering it? Okay, so, yeah, I would say the one thing political candidates who want to be a straight arrow and don't want to be corrupt can do, and really should do, is get on social media, get on Instagram, target the millennials, target the young people, and raise money online, go to the people, ask for money. I mean, it's a huge opportunity. Everyone's fed up with the corruption in this country. And if a good politician, a straight arrow that isn't a demagogue, goes to the Brazilian people and says, look, I'm a straight arrow, I can't win without your help. And if you don't give me money, then I'm going to be forced to take money from regular politicians that, you know, may start to become corrupt. He may have a real shot. Similar to, by the way, Macron did. Macron was an outsider, he used social media in a good way, and was able to win the election in France. So, did I answer your question? Yes, okay.
And any other question from the public? Go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Julia.
Julia?
Yeah.
Does
And I have a question that in the United States you have, like, I don't know if it's a system, I don't know exactly what it is, but if you're not like happy with your representative in the politics, you can call him and send him an email, right?
Yeah, you could go to his office and bang on his door.
So you think that this is really efficient? Do you have like a lot of things change with that, and could this work here in Brazil?
Okay. I would say this. There's never been a time in U.S. history where a person couldn't go and do that. There's never been a time in our history where a person literally could not go to a representative's door, bang on the door, say open the door. They still do this today in Congress. There's a famous comedian in the U.S. called Jon Stewart, and he was trying to get a bill through for 9/11 veterans, and he was banging on congressmen's doors who didn't want to pass it, asking to talk to them with a camera. And of course it's up to them if they open the door or not, but they were banging on it. They sent letters, they write emails, they could do it to the well, they can't bang on the White House door, but they could send letters and emails. So, I mean, I would think it's been pretty beneficial, because if you're a politician, you're kind of secluded and
About them, and we don't really know about their lives and about their past unless there's like a scandal. So what's your point of view about that, and what can we do about that, especially during election time?
about basically background checking your politicians thoroughly,
Yeah.
like we do in the United States.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like Hillary did, you know.
Yeah.
So we could like identify.
Yeah, Hillary, they over back-checked her.
Yeah.
Like,
because like there was like music and stuff, you know. So people were like, oh, we like them because this is really jokes.
yeah, so that's interesting because like in the U.S., especially today, in the modern day with technology and social media, every little thing about politicians passed. Especially if you're running for the presidency, the smallest thing you did wrong can cost you many votes. And the media in our country, both not just CNN but TMZ, which is like a kind of celebrity media, all types, they go in and they really dig for that story that everyone's gonna love to hear. They really dig into the background. So just go and make sure your politicians are doing the right thing and they don't have a bad background, and they can do that without getting worried for punishment by the state. So I would encourage Brazilian journalists and the Brazilian media to go in and be as rigorous as our US media is and look through every single little thing. Like in Donald Trump's case, they found out that he cheated the draft in Vietnam.
But in Germany, for example, it works. Because there's not only two ideologies, like in the States, there's only two parties. What do you think about the two parties?
It would do good. Oh, and also as well, because of the way the primary system is set up, and because of changing demographics, the two parties have grown further apart. And compromise is becoming very increasingly harder. And you've seen that over the last 20 years. So I think it would be very good. It would be very good for the United States if a Macron type figure were to come in, someone that was a centrist, a moderate, and have a viable third party that was right in between, that could challenge the Republican and Democratic dominance and increase competitiveness. Frankly, I think when you just have two parties, they're naturally inclined to keep themselves in power and prevent competition. And when you have a country as big as and diverse as the United States, you're not going to get very representative views all the time when you just have two parties in power. So, yeah, I would definitely want a third party, a moderate, preferably party, to come in and shake things up a little bit in the U.S. No, it's a sign that our founding fathers were absolute political geniuses.
Yeah, but
For Brazil, I mean, after the dictatorship, you obviously had to write a new constitution. I mean, it's a sign, I think it's a sign of destability, or, actually, I would backtrack. It's a sign of not smart constitution writing when you have to change it so many times. The reason our Constitution has stood the test of time for so long, and I do have my complaints, but the reason it's been so good is because it allows for maximum flexibility within the government. Okay? As I understand, you're going through a pension crisis right now in Brazil, and if you don't solve it pretty soon, the bank account's going to disappear and you're not going to be able to pay the pension. Is that correct? And I understand in order to change that, you need to amend the Constitution to do that. As an American, like, that's unimaginable to me. That's like ridiculous to me. And I understand the reason your Constitution is so long is because you just, and the dictatorship just ended and you wanted to make sure that it would never happen again. But, I mean, you need flexibility. The times change. And the founding fathers knew this. They knew that America 100 years from when they were writing it, we're going to be completely different, and the Constitution needed to be flexible enough to allow for change. So, I would say that countries that have to continually change their...
Sebastian will be launching his book here. How much is it? Thanks a lot, Sebastian. It was a very clever
Thank you very much.
speech comparing Brazil, US, and hope it keeps us from the depths. Okay, thanks a lot, guys, and thanks for the public for the maximum. The participation was really good as well. Okay, thanks a lot.
Muito obrigado, gente.
Sebastian for president. We vote for you.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful, for heroes proved in liberating strife, country loved. And mercy more than life. America, America, may God thy gold refine till all success be nobleness and every gain divine. When I was in school, you know, we used to sing it something like this. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties